Hey everyone, on today's episode of Noon, it is my pleasure to introduce you to my esteemed friend Kegan. He is both a dedicated nurse and an experienced paramedic, bringing a wealth of knowledge to the table and eager to share his captivating story with us. During our conversation, we will delve into the consequences that can arise from pranks taken too far. Kegan will also regale us with tales of his proudest moments on the job, shed light on how he has navigated the difficult terrain of patient loss, and explore a range of other intriguing topics. Join us for an engaging and illuminating discussion as Kegan unfolds his journey, recounts moments of immense pride, and provides insight into the emotional landscape of healthcare. Let's get started. All right, Kegan, thank you so much for joining us on the 911 Nonsense podcast today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Can I get an introduction of yourself?
Sure. So my name is Kegan Godby. I have been working in EMS since 2007. I got my paramedic in 2009. I've been working as a paramedic since then. I've worked pre-hospital and hospital, both small and large ERs. And I've spent the last 6.5 years working a really cool and unique job, I feel, as a paramedic for a government site that is dedicated to destroying chemical weapons.
That's really cool. That is very unique. How did you get into a position like that?
I feel like most things, it's all about who you know. My old partner ended up getting a job up there, and he got a job because his old partner had a job up there. And I remember his last day at the hospital, he and I talked for a couple of hours in the parking lot. I just asked him a bunch of questions, and I went home and I was like, I don't know why I'm not doing something like this. And I kept an ear out and an eye out for a job opening, and one opened up, and about 4 or 5 months later, I started.
That's really cool.
I started the day after Martin Luther King Day in 2017.
Oh, that's neat. And
Yeah,
how was the process in getting hired?
arduous.
Arduous.
Yeah.
Because they have to do a lot of background screens on you, right?
Yes. So before you ever even go out there, they do a pretty thorough background screen, and then I had to fill out, and every veteran that's listening to this will understand, but I had to fill out something called an SF-86, which is basically a prostate exam on paper. I had to answer any questions at all regarding my personal history. I had to list people I had lived with for 10 years, jobs, reasons for leaving jobs, any speeding tickets, any crosswords. I had to put ex-wives informations down, like
Jeez.
everything.
That's nuts. For like 10 years prior, all of it
Oh yeah.
about?
Like I had to answer, like, have I ever been in the vicinity of marijuana? Have I ever seen it?
Really? And
Oh
that's so
yeah.
crazy.
All kinds of stuff.
Oh, they're going to have to get away from that because of the legalization of marijuana, and not just in the medical sense, but now it being everywhere. Like, I can't walk into my apartment without going through at least 3 puffs of different crowds smoking weed on the
Sure.
street.
So the problem with, or the issue with that is, even though it's legal here in Colorado, and now in New Mexico, it's still federally illegal. So we have to abide by federal guidelines.
Yeah, I got into it with a nurse not too long ago because we were transporting a psych patient, and he had marijuana on his person, and he may have had a card, I'm not sure, but I told her we can't take that, and she was like, but it's legal now, why? And I said, because we're putting him in an airplane, and we are still regulated federally. Like, that's transporting drugs. If we do that, that's super illegal, and we can get closed down. Like, I had to have this whole conversation with her, and she was so offended about it.
Personal feelings aside, I this job is good enough that it's just worth it to not tingle with it. There will be a day. It's fine.
So have you gotten randomed?
A few times.
A few times.
Yeah.
I had never been randomed until I started this job, and I'm like, not even shitting you. I got random like 4 times in a year.
We've had guys that have been randomed like 6 months out of the year, and they come in and they're like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, this doesn't feel random. I'm like, I get that. I don't make the list, man. So I just need you to pee in this cup. All right.
Yeah. You're like, keep pissing me off, bro.
Yeah. Like we'll make it.
I'll see you in a month.
That's right. I'll make it not random.
So what function do you perform in that position?
So our job is primarily occupational medicine.
Mm-hmm.
95% of it is scheduled physical appointments and heat stress monitoring. The guys that go in, they have to be monitored because it's a very physically stressful environment. So they wear the little gym chest bands, and they have the
Mm-hmm.
watches with their heart rates, and we have to monitor them and screen them for heat stress and make sure they're good to go in. Every once in a while, there's an ambulance response. We have two ambulances on site that are we're fully ALS capable,
Mm-hmm.
and our clinic functions to the level of I'd say like a small rural ER, and then we're trained in chemical response. So we, as paramedics, have potential to suit up into what's called OSHA C level gear, which is gas mask, the hood, the apron, the gloves, and the boots.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually trained on how to render care in that gear.
Oof. That sounds awful. So that's not a hazmat awareness certification, right?
No,
What hazmat do you have to get?
I have gone through training at the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Chemical Defense, which is out near Baltimore.
Wow.
Gone through two specialized courses for that.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
That's probably like one of my favorite parts of this job. And not my job specifically, but as a paramedic, you get to go to some of the best training.
yeah.
Like some of the coolest training in whatever job you kind of get into.
I think we're really lucky. Our former boss, who retired on the last couple of years, had been working in DMail for a long time, and he worked with a lot of paramedics from a lot of different places. And his educational philosophy was go somewhere else and learn what they're doing.
Mhm.
So I have been sent for work to find conferences within the continental US. Once a year, I get to travel.
That's really cool.
So I've gone to a conference on the Oregon coast. I've been to refreshers at UCLA and George Washington University.
Wow. That's
Um,
neat.
Later this year, I'm either going back to the Oregon coast or to Austin for a week for for a conference.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
So
and
for your clinic, and I don't know if you can discuss this, but how many people, because you said that you function as kind of a small rural ER, like how many people do you have on site roughly?
um, we can have like a few hundred on site.
A few hundred. And when you're
Yeah,
working, are you working like in a controlled environment or are you guys outside because it's so physically demanding?
we are. It is a fully controlled site.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How cool. And how often are you getting prepared like to dress up to go in?
So we do drills and stuff. It's actually an incredibly safe and like well regulated environment. You know, people bitch about government redundancy, and I get it, but it's also a thing that's kept us safe.
Yeah,
The only time I've ever put my gear on is to train.
that's good.
Yeah, which
But
is
at
good.
least
I
you're
hate wearing it.
prepared.
It sucks. Oh
Yeah, no, I
man,
can't imagine that. I don't miss a bunker gear in the summer, and I can't imagine wearing the hazmat suit. Those are terrible, terrible
yeah.
things.
Of course, you know the some of the times they've trained us, they've been doing it at like 11 a.m. in June. It's like, come on, guys, can we do this in the winter or something where it's at least kind of reasonable to wear shit like this?
No, they have to prepare you in the worst time.
Yeah.
But even in June up there, like it's a huge difference from what it was down here in New Mexico, right? Like
Oh no.
we're hitting already hundreds and 10-degree temperatures.
Uh, Pueblo, the city of our Pueblo is pretty warm.
Is it?
Yeah.
Ugh, gross. That sounds terrible.
Oh yeah. It is. You're gonna have some swamp ass.
Yeah. Colorado swamp ass. Oh,
Oh
gross.
man, the worst.
So you recently also graduated with your BSN, right?
Yeah. Summa cum laude, baby.
Yeah, congratulations, man. That's exciting.
Thank you.
So you get to see the best of both worlds, right? Because you're hanging out and working as a paramedic full time, but then you're also kind of dabbling on the nursing side.
Yeah, I do work PRN as a nurse on an inpatient floor. Been a nurse for a couple of years now, and I'll tell you, as a paramedic, I had a really skewed perspective of what floor nursing was. And now that I'm in the thick of it, let me tell you, every paramedic that's listening to this, we don't know shit about it. It's
No.
it's so hard. It can be physically demanding, be like mentally demanding if you're trying to balance, 5 or 6 different order sets for patients. And of
Sure.
course, no one has meds at the same time, so every hour on the hour, you're checking your little paper brain and seeing what I got next, and performing wound care and calf care and central line care, and it's just you're never caught up. There's just spaces to take a breath.
You're just trying to get through the day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I will be the first to admit that while I think I'm a pretty good paramedic, I am not a very strong nurse yet.
No?
So, uh, I mean, it's a new skill set and it's a new thing. So, and I'll be honest, it's a different type of thing.
Yeah, you have to change your thinking a little bit.
Yeah, especially on the floor. Like I feel if I was working in the emergency room, uh, enough skill sets overlap there that I shift in pretty seamlessly. But on the floor, dealing with the same patients every day, you get really spoiled when you have an asshole and you're like, well, in 15 minutes I'll turn you over to the hospital.
Yeah.
Whereas like I'm gonna leave this room and in 10 minutes you're gonna push your call light and I have to come back in here and be like, what can I do for you?
Yeah, that's got to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
Um, Good on you, man, because I couldn't do it. There's been a huge push for paramedics to get into the nursing field, and it's kind of a no-brainer because it is a huge pay difference.
Mhm.
Um, so how are you getting paid PRN versus your full-time medic job? Like, is it fairly comparable?
Yeah. My full-time paramedic job is unique in our pay. Being a federal contractor, I don't necessarily want to talk numbers,
No.
um, but I'm willing to bet that if you were to take every paramedic that's employed by a private agency or corporation in the U.S. and then list us all by pay, I am willing to bet myself and my coworkers sit in the top 1%.
Top 1%
Yeah.
for paramedic pay.
Yes.
That's pretty good, dude. That's pretty
Yeah.
good. And are you salary or hourly?
Hourly.
Oh, that's even better. So you get
Yeah.
all of like the federal government benefits too, right? Like the holidays and the.
No, because we work, we man the clinic 24/7. So like we get paid on
Hmm.
the holidays, but we don't get them off.
So do you get time and a half?
No,
No? Well, I
no.
mean, you make enough money that that's probably okay.
Yeah. And then because we're contractors, we don't get all of like the federal benefits.
Sure.
So we get enough. And
Yeah.
it's not a particularly challenging job.
No, that's pretty good.
It's a lot of it's a lot of learning to jump through hoops and to kind of temper government expectations. But ultimately, it's not nearly as challenging physically as working on a rig is.
Sure. And
I
I
used
think
to,
that's kind of like the goal is to get into a federal position, right?
yeah,
Like a federal fire department, a lot of people want to get into that position because you're not working as hard as you would be in a city rig.
yeah. The benefit of my schedule, we work 24-hour shifts and we work a rotating schedule. So each shift works on average 8 days a month.
Wow, that is nice, dude. That's nice.
Yeah. So there's a lot of time off. And, some of the guys I work with, they work their 8 and they pick up overtime here and there. And then they have other stuff going on. There's people like me that you would think like, oh, 5 days off sounds great. And then day 2, you're like, I'm going to start climbing the fucking walls if I don't get out of here.
That's so funny.
So I started teaching for a little bit at a local community college, and some of my students would ask me about calls and tell me about the thing they did on the rig, and I was like, "That's really cool, you guys." But I said like my outdoor cat days are done. I'm an indoor cat now. Like you can
I'm
go out in the
I'm
neighborhood and
spoiled.
get fights and tom around all day. Like I'm fucking fat and spoiled, and like I got dinner time and then I got nap time. Like
Dude,
that's a
that's
young
pretty
man's game.
fantastic. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, what are you teaching?
I don't teach anymore with the nursing thing, and then this full time job. I just don't have the time to do it. But I was
Sure.
just helping out with labs and stuff,
Oh, okay.
just proctoring.
Like for EMTs, like basics, paramedics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
No, that's cool. I just started teaching. I got my my AHA, my instructor cards for AHA, and then I have my instructor cards for PHTLS and AMLS. So I started teaching
nice.
just recently, and it has been a very eye-opening experience. Teaching some of the people that come through the classes
Oh yeah,
has been quite interesting.
I really miss teaching. One of the things I've been able to do working on the floor is, and having gone through nursing school, I know the gaps that exist in a lot of nurses' knowledge because nursing school doesn't teach you how to be a nurse. It teaches you how to be like a generalized nurse, but they expect you to then get your certifications and stuff in whatever floor you go to. So it's a lot of like getting you to a base level, and then you get stuff like your CEN, for example, or your CMSRN, like those types of certifications where you specialize. But those certifications aren't necessarily easy to get. And some of the nurses I work with have had questions about like how to read an EKG, and I've been able to like really break it down. And I kind of shift back into that teaching mode. They're like, "Wow, you're really good at teaching this." I'm like, "Well, I should be."
I know. You've been doing it for long enough, right?
Yeah.
So how long did you work on an ambulance for?
Oh man. Well, I've worked for two different services, um, 9-ish years, give or take.
9 issues. And were both of them, like, I know one of them because I knew that I knew you when we were working together, was
Yeah.
a fairly strenuous 911 system, but how about the other one?
Um, so, well, we spent our time at an ambulance service. I'll let you initialize there.
Yeah.
Uh, the other one, the other service is no longer with us, unfortunately. Um,
Mm.
Down south.
Okay. That's funny because I was
Correct.
just talking about it yesterday.
It's ironic considering the name, and I think from there,
Right.
if you can piece it together.
Yeah.
Um, but that's where I cut my teeth, and I, I got my EMT license. I took my test at the end of 2006, and I had to wait 4 months to turn 21 before anywhere would hire me. And that first service hired me, and like right away, they're like, "You got a pulse and a license? Awesome, let's go."
Your paper's still wet? It's good. You're good.
That's right. That means you're ready to learn.
Yep. How long were you there for? I'm surprised. Like, did we cross paths there?
No,
Because when I moved up here, let's see, in 2009, that's where I started.
so I was there in April 2007, and in December of 2007, I took a job as an ER tech because I was like, I can't do this anymore.
It was rough, right? Like, I was there for probably, yeah, a little less than a year. And like the experience that I got down there was
Oh yeah,
insane. It was such good experience as an EMT intermediate. I was running my own truck.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was the last few months I was doing the same thing.
Yeah, running codes and stuff as an EMT intermediate
Mhm.
because the supervisor felt comfortable with my medical decisions. But like, if you asked for protocols, they'd be like, "Hmm? What's a protocol?" I
Protocols.
know. Wait, do we have a book for that?
Oh, it's on the state website. You could just find it there. It's fine.
Exactly. It was a great learning experience though down there. It's some intense, insane calls down there.
So I worked down there as an EMT, and then when I got my paramedic, um, I was still working in the ER, but I wanted to start getting actual paramedic experience, and I didn't necessarily want to go to work for an ambulance service, because I was trying to get into the fire department, and so I worked down there as well. And in the roughly year I spent down there as a medic, I earned some stripes. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I believe it. Do you remember any of your calls down there?
Some were fun, and some were humbling, and some were on that other side of not so fun and not so enjoyable. I remember in particular. So I got my paramedic, and there was no like orientation period to being a paramedic. They're
No.
like, "You're a paramedic? There's your rig,
Yeah.
and
Have
here are
fun.
your narcs." Yeah, and so it's very much like, yeah, all right, well, let's figure this out. And I, like every brand new paramedic, I had that unearned swagger of like, yeah, like I'm hot shit in a champagne glass.
Yeah.
And I remember once we got this call to a local big box mart, and we had been out there before in the prior couple of weeks and responding to like people that were sick and didn't want to be at work and blah blah blah. And so we get this call for chest pain, and I go out and respond to it, and I'm like walking in, and I got this like, oh, this is another bullshit call, and the manager's like waving us in. They're like, you gotta come in, she's over here. And so we walk in with our gurney, and I got the monitor, and I'm like, yeah, where's this patient at? And he points me, and I see this lady sitting on a bench, and I can see from 100 feet away the sheen of reflective
Yeah.
sweat,
The
and
diaphoresis.
like she's all pallorous and gray, and I was like, oh no, like what have I wished for?
Yeah.
And so we're walking in. Of course, the fire department down there, it's mostly volunteers, but this is one of the few paid services. And they're like, "You need us? You seem like you got this." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I need one of you guys in the back."
You got to come with
And
me.
yeah, like this is not going to end well. So we get her loaded up, and I start running down the ACS algorithm, and I'm like, "Shit, what do I do? Aspirin, okay, nitro, da da da." And of course, in paramedic school, you do these statics, and you're able to rattle it all off, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything when you're
No.
like, "Shit, what do I actually do?"
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm like, "Aspirin, nitro, oxygen, morphine." And then we go to the level 1 trauma center, and this particular ambulance service didn't have a reputation for the most scrupulous and or competent medics. So they heard, come on, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
this is a true story.
And we rolled in, and they're like, "Oh, from this service, okay, like what's going on?" And luckily, one of my paramedic school classmates was in there, and she was like, "Oh no, he's good. Like this patient's probably really sick."
He's not lying. I can vouch for him.
And we she had a 100% LED occlusion.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and like, whew, man, just thinking about that call, I'm like, I remember how panicked I was, but after like writing the chart and stuff, and having some time to self-reflect, I was like, why did I walk into this call thinking like it was a bunch of nonsense?
Yeah.
And kind of having that moment of clarity of like, why did I think I've earned the right to like, oh, this is probably going to be BS.
Yeah.
And like, I got this. I don't got this.
Yeah.
And like, I need to start. It was very much a shifting point in my career, because at that point I stopped trying to approach calls as like, this is BS, and started approaching it with a more open mind. This could be a serious thing, and like this call is for this. Like, what are the things it could possibly be? And even with a lot of experience, like we would get dispatched to certain calls, and I would start reading my protocols like on the way over, just to be
Sure.
like, all right, like, do I know my dosages? Do I know what I need to do?
I think that's kind of a good, like, realizing somebody who cares and wants to do the job versus somebody, again, like you were saying, who's just like, wow, this is just another bullshit call. I think when you start carrying that protocol pocketbook with you, and you're like, okay, now I kind of need to be able to recognize what to do and what treatments I need to make, even if you're rolling up to something that you thought you were rolling up to and it's not, I think that really shows that it really does show that you did self-reflect and you were able to turn that around and make you a better provider,
And like, I'm not gonna lie and say that I didn't get salty. Like, everyone gets salty.
Everybody does.
And after your like fifth or sixth 23 Bravo in a day, you're like, all right, this is bullshit.
Yeah, and the 23 Bravos are the ETOH patients that we have here. So yeah, when you're running 5 or 6 ETOHers and you're in that downtown loop, you're just getting stuck in the downtown loop because you just keep, you clear the hospital and then you have to go 5 blocks away and you pick up another drunk, and then you clear the hospital and you have to go another 5 blocks away and you're picking up another drunk. That can be hard.
Right, and you keep relieving the crews that are like, you can go ahead and cancel, there's a closer unit, and you hear it on the radio and you're like, oh
yeah, no,
I want to eat my sandwich,
please. Yeah, that's funny. That's so hard. The regulations that don't allow for lunch breaks on 12-hour services. I think people don't realize how hard that is.
I think, it's having listened to all of your other episodes,
Thank
long
you.
time listener, first time caller. Uh, One thing I think that I'm starting to see change is this mindset around EMS that um we don't, we need to take care of ourselves and we need to advocate for ourselves. And I'm really curious how EMS will change in the coming years, as we as paramedics and EMTs start to realize like this whole mindset we've had of, well, it's just part of the job. And like, well, what you signed up for is kind of bullshit that we've been sold to allow us to be treated kind of like garbage.
Yes. And not just in like you have a call, take it. This is, and it doesn't matter what the call is, but also in the assault form, right? Like assault and battery.
Yeah.
That it
Oh, I've been
literally is
assaulted.
just, it's part of the job. Do it. Suck it up.
Yeah. I still have scars from getting assaulted by a patient.
Jeez. What
I
did that
do.
patient
Yeah.
do to you, dude?
I mean, I don't know if it's just because I'm a delicate little flower, but like
I doubt it.
he, he was fiddling with his seatbelt buckle. So I reached over to strap him back in. And I was like, hey man, if you keep doing this, I'm going to restrain you. And, he grabbed my forearms, and like dug his nails into my
Oh, gross.
forearms.
That's so gross.
And like, he was a homeless dude. His hands were super dirty.
Oh.
And like, he dug in. And I was at that weird thing where like, if I pulled, they just went in a little bit deeper. And
Yeah.
finally I did this like kind of relax and he let go of me. And we roll into the hospital and I got these like 4 fingernail marks on my forearms. And, like they only really show up if I get a tan.
Sure.
Um, but like every time I see him, I'm like, oh yeah, like that happened.
Yeah. And it's not like we just restrain people for fun. I mean, having the
I mean, speak
seatbelts
for
on
yourself.
is not an option. Come on, Keegan. Having the seatbelts on in the back of an ambulance is a complete, like, it's a huge safety risk because
Oh yeah,
when the boxes roll, if something happens, that is a projectile in the back of the ambulance that you don't want to have to be dealing with, on top of all of the other projectiles that you have floating around.
yeah.
What did you think about those? I don't know if you saw them. One of the EMTs, one of the paramedics at the ambulance service that we worked for, made this little box that went over the seatbelts so that people can push the buttons. Do you remember that?
No,
Yeah, and it had a little like key that almost looked like a handcuff key where it was just thin. So there was a little hole, and you push the key in the hole, and it pushes the seatbelt button to release the seatbelt.
that's brilliant.
It's brilliant, but it's also a safety risk, right? Because what happens if you do get in an accident and now you're incapacitated and the patient can't get out of the restraint or out of the seatbelts?
I
that's a
see. I mean,
that's a tough one, huh?
it is tough.
Yeah, I think it is brilliant, and I do think that it has its place. I don't know if they are still utilizing them. I want to say that I have seen them on the ambulances when I walk by, but I don't know if they're still utilizing them or not.
Man, every once in a while when I'm back in Albuquerque picking up my kids, I'll drive by a unit and I'll like turn my head and see like, do I know who's in there? And I don't recognize a soul anymore.
Dude, no, it's so few. The turnover rate was so huge that you don't recognize anybody. Like I still consistently walk into the hospitals here, and I recognize more nurses than I recognize EMTs on the ambulance.
Yeah, it makes me feel so old.
I know. I know, right? And so fast, right? Like it just came on
Like
so
back in my
fast.
day, we used to work with these other people. Like, who are you, young
I
whippersnappers?
know. They're all new and bright-eyed and you're like, "Oh, okay."
Ugh, I'm I'm over seasoned and well cooked, man. I'll tell you.
I feel you. I feel you. I'm a little too cooked sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, a little tough.
Yeah. Let's start talking about some of your calls. I know it's been a while since you've been in the 911 system, but we could probably dredge up a couple good ones, huh?
Oh, I'm sure they're buried down deep. I'm sure we can dig them up.
Okay, good. What would you say has been probably your most memorable or favorite call?
Um, so I don't necessarily know that I have a favorite call, so much as I have like favorite experiences of working with other people.
Okay.
In fact, I was actually just thinking about this. I was hoping there would be a way to talk about this, but like very soon after I started working for an ambulance service, I almost got myself in serious trouble
Uh-oh.
um, because I axe murdered an ambulance.
How did you do that, dude?
So I was cleared off orientation and I was working my double medic stuff, and I was working with a paramedic. He might still be working as a supervisor. I'm not going to name names,
No.
but he and I were lamenting that EMS has gotten a little more serious than we appreciated. We miss when the crews would do stuff like play pranks on each other and like
Uh-huh.
keep morale up. And so we decided one fateful evening that we were gonna bring it back, and like we decided to dive into it with both feet. So we went to a Walgreens and got Vaseline for door handles, and then oh no, it gets better. You remember when Hastings was still around?
Yeah,
That's how, I mean, first off, that's how old I am, but
we are.
we are, yes.
Yeah.
Um, we walked into Hastings and we immediately started rooting around the dollar CD bin and just
Uh-huh.
picking out the most obnoxious looking CDs we could. And when we would get to the hospital and we'd unload our patient, we would then, there was a truck there, we'd mess with it. And we like looped up a door handle here and there. We put CDs in the thing and like turn the truck on and like crank the volume and like and
Cranked
turn
it
the
all the
truck
way
on.
up. Yep.
And so they turn the truck on and it would just blare this horrible like dollar store CD at them. Um, but one of the things we picked up at Walgreens was a can of Axe, the body spray.
Like the body spray. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And we hit one ambulance in particular with everything.
Oh my
We
God.
lubed up the door handles, and I believe this person got in and strapped the door handles closed on the inside with a longboard strap. So like you had to get through and he had to do it because like you don't know who I am. I got broad ass shoulders. I'm not fitting through any porthole.
No.
And we put a CD in, and I think it was Los Pumas de Jalisco. So like just this like mariachi music that a Mexican restaurant would have a hard time playing.
That's funny.
But the last thing we did, we took this can of Axe and we taped it open and running, and then put it in the back of their truck like a bug bomb.
That's so messed up, dude.
And if you're listening to this, don't, it's a terrible idea. I was there. So like I learned this from experience. Don't do this. But this paramedic and we're like, we have to see the results of our handiwork. So the crew comes down, and the paramedic we did it to, he's a really great guy, but he's not real known for his sense of humor.
Oh goodness.
And they open the passenger. But first off, I'm really lucky that they weren't bringing a passenger or a patient out of the hospital.
Yeah.
This rig was not safe for human consumption.
Oh my God.
But they open the back doors and they are physically knocked back by this cloud of axe that hits them. And they're like, who did this? And so they go around to the front and they try to open the doors, and of course their hands are slipping off the thing. And then they wipe down the door handle.
Oh man.
And they can't open the doors because the doors are strapped in from the inside. So one of them has to go into this fucking frat boy smelling patient compartment.
Such a jerk, man.
And open the porthole and like unclip the thing. So they open the door. They get it all loaded in. They turn their truck on, and the fucking music starts blaring.
Oh man.
And
Oh man.
apparently this paramedic got on the radio and was like, "We're 10-7. We're coming back to base." And so they pull the truck in, and we get a call like 15 minutes later from the supervisor, and he's like, "Hey, do you know what's going on? Do you know who did this?" And we're like planning done, and we're like, "No, I have no idea." Like, and he's like, "Because we've looked at all of the ambulances, because the other crews have complained, and you guys are the only common crew that have been there for every one of these." And he's like,
They
so
used their deduction skills.
yeah. So he's like, if you don't tell us if it was you or not, we're gonna start pulling camera footage. And if we have to start doing that, it gets way more serious. And I was like, okay, yeah, it was us. And he's like, okay, you guys need to come back to base. So we go back to base.
They pulled you from the line.
Yeah.
Jeez, it was serious then.
We come back to base and we parked out in front because they were like, leave your truck running. Like, you're in trouble. You're not in so much trouble that we're not going to still use you for the night.
Yeah.
So we opened the main door and you can smell axe in the building. Not a small building.
No,
And
no, that is a pretty large building.
the smell gets stronger as we get closer and closer to the supervisor's office. And we're in there, and it's a FOS who is a field soup who's acting as a 0-1 or as an op soup for the night. And then the op soup is there, and the op soup has his back turned to us, and like big Southern gentleman. And the field soup is like, what the fuck happened? And we were trying to explain, like, we're just trying to like have fun and like do all this stuff, and I think it got way out of hand. Like, we went big on the last one. And he's like, okay, do you realize that they've been transporting a patient, like that they couldn't have put a patient in the back of the ambulance? So we're like, we recognize that now, like all this other stuff. And they're like, okay, our punishment was to break down the unit for bioquell.
Oh, goodness.
And we go out to the garage, and all the doors are open, and you can smell above the diesel fumes and the car washing soap and everything else, Axe body spray. They had to bioquell the unit like 3 times, and the smell never. God. The smell, if it was a hot day outside, you could still smell like the faintest bit of Axe in the seat fabric.
That's so funny, dude.
But when we're getting our asses chewed out, the op soup still has his back turned to us and hasn't said a thing. And like, that to me is way more terrifying than being yelled at.
Sure.
And he turns around and he's like trying to not smile. He's got like his mouth in front of him like this. And he's like, I wanted to be mad. He told me what happened. And then this paramedic comes in and I hear him cursing, and he opens the door and I could smell him down the hall before he got to the office. And then I didn't get fired, so I was like, I'm probably pretty safe.
Dude.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good one.
You got to learn, right?
Yeah, the worst prank I think I had on me was I don't know if you remember that like blow up gray alien that they were passing around for a while. So you'd randomly find it in the back of your truck. Well, we were parked at one of the hospitals and walked out, and somebody had completely duct taped him to the back of the ambulance. So you couldn't open the back doors at all. You had to peel off, like, it had to have been like 2 or 3 rolls of duct tape.
Oh, Jesus.
Just holding this blow up alien to the doors. It was nuts. Those were the good old days.
Yeah, I think we probably would have gotten away with it if we hadn't. I think the axe was the tipping point. I think everything else would have been like, all right, we're messing with people.
Yeah.
And we'd be like, yeah, fine. But when you make a rig like unsafe for humans, then yeah, you probably crossed the line somewhere.
I mean, let's be honest. Axe body spray already is unsafe for humans.
It was Phoenix flavored.
Oh, that's my favorite one.
That. Well,
at least it smelled good.
And it's a shame it wasn't yours.
I know. It was. I probably would have loved that. Oh, that's pretty funny. That do you think that the outcome would have been different if it had been a different medic?
No, it's pretty bad. And like, it took this medic a long time to forgive me.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, and like with the hindsight of maturity, I get it.
Sure.
Like, I want to say like, oh, he was being just a humorless dick, but no, that's a pretty good reason to be humorless about something.
That's pretty funny. So I'm gonna kind of throw a curveball at you. Do you have any calls where you actually saved a life and you're like super proud about it?
Yeah, I was working in the hospital, and I'm getting like goose pimples thinking about it. I was working in the hospital. I was doing dispatch that day, and crew brought in a pediatric code, and this little girl was out at her grandparents' farm, and she couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 years old when this happened. And she was at her grandma and grandpa's farm, and they had a koi pond with a bunch of fish in it. And they went out there and they fed the fish, and she thought it was the coolest thing ever. And they all went back inside, and she got outside and wanted to go back to the fish pond. And it was not a natural pond, so it had that slick lining in it.
Mm-hmm.
And she got too close, slipped, fell in, and the pond was just deep enough that she couldn't stand up. And they couldn't find her in the house. They started looking for her outside. They found her in the pond, and it was pretty cold outside. And I actually think that's what saved her life. And we brought her into the hospital, and I was supposed to be at the dispatch desk that day. And I think I just grabbed one of the other techs or medics and was like, "You need to sit here. I need to go work this. Like, I can't. For whatever reason, I couldn't not be in the room." And they brought her in, and she had a pulse, and she kept going pulseless. And we ended up stabilizing her and getting her to the PICU. And I remember I left the room, and we were in there for about an hour, and we left the room, and I had tears streaming down my face, and like trying to answer ambulance calls. And it was right near the end of our shift, and they had done a CT on her. She had a lot of brain swelling, and one of the other techs I worked with, she was in the room with me. She went up that room every day, and ended up like getting banned from the PICU.
Oh, goodness.
And got really close with the mom, and this little girl ended up making a full recovery.
Wow.
And she would probably be about 11 or 12 now. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I reached out to the mom on Facebook and was just like, "Hey, I was part of this effort at the hospital, and I know I had asked this tech that went up there, was still friends with them, and I asked this tech to like reach out to the family, and I was like, is it okay if I message them just for some closure?" And they're like, "That's totally fine." And I messaged them, and I got pictures back, and she looks like a normal kid.
That's great.
And I could do nothing else in my career, and I feel like it's all been worth it.
Like you accomplished what you were supposed to do because you had something calling
Yeah.
you into that room that day.
Yeah. And I remember when that call happened, when she was brought in, my daughter at the time was 4 or 5 months old, and her mom and I had separated, and I just called her in tears and went over there, and I just held my daughter for like an hour and a half. I was really rough.
Yeah, it sounds like you can tell in your voice that was pretty rough on you. Do you think that it was rougher because your child was around that age at that time?
Oh yeah. I don't remember what this little girl looks like. I just keep imagining my daughter.
Yeah.
And like I used to think, like, I didn't get it when people would describe stuff like that until it happened to me, and now I 100% understand.
Yeah, having children completely changed your outlook on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be rough, man. I mean, I don't have kids, but the pediatric calls are the hardest.
Yeah.
I think we all have a soft spot for kids, and that makes it difficult when we do have the kid calls.
Yeah. And I'm thankful that she seems to be doing okay. I haven't followed up since then.
Well, it's good that you were able to also contact and get that closure, and that you feel good about it. Oh, that's really good. We had a guy once really, really, really far across town who he called. He was young. He was like in his early 40s, very fit. He was going through a divorce, had just gotten seen, for anxiety, and had gotten medications for anxiety. And he said he woke up and he felt anxious, but something just didn't feel right. And kind of a little bit of chest pain. He just, like, it felt like anxiety to him, but he just wanted to make sure because it was like, 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. And he just looked a little bit off, but the fire department was like, they did the vitals and they were like, everything looks good. And, you can't really, and I don't know if it's like this for everywhere, but for here, it's whoever's first on scene kind of has control of that scene.
Yeah.
And so didn't want to step on toes, so I was kind of hanging out in the back just taking notes, just to see. And the captain asked him, like, do you want to go get evaluated? And he's like, well, no, not really. And thank goodness the fire guy actually respected, the transport service, because he turned around and he looked at me. He said, is there anything that you would do different? And I said, well, I'd feel a little more comfortable before getting a refusal if we got a 12 lead. Like, he had the refusal paperwork all drafted up and ready for this guy to sign. And we did a 12 lead, and I don't remember what it was now, but he popped up just enough elevation to call it a myocardial infarction on the monitor. Like, just enough to call it. Like if you had printed it out and it didn't say it, you wouldn't even call it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was just barely there. So I was like, well, now really, you have the option, but you probably shouldn't refuse at this point because you are having a heart attack. Like, let's take you to the hospital. We're going to take you lights and sirens. That was probably one of the only progressing STEMIs or progressing heart attacks I've ever seen. He went from a little bit of elevation to tombstone T waves by the time we got to the downtown facility. And I just literally kept hitting print. And every time you hit print on the monitor, it was increasing and increasing and increasing. I called the hospital. When we were back, this was in, just to give you kind of an idea, we were at like Tramway and Paseo.
Oh, geez.
We were way out there. And so I called them as soon as we left this guy's house, like, hey, we're coming in with a heart attack, activate the people that you need to activate. And we showed up and they hadn't activated. They were like, well, we wanted to wait and see what you guys had. I'm like, bro, I gave you every opportunity here. Like, door to balloon time matters. You know what I mean? And
oh, God.
He ended up waiting. He got really lucky because I think he ended up waiting 2 hours for cath lab to get there after we showed up. And I went and I got the opportunity to go and visit him like a day after he had his cath. And he had 100% occlusion, and that felt really good. I did everything that I could do and everything that I needed to do to facilitate getting him to the right place. And he wasn't just another, statistic, which was nice.
Mm-hmm.
That one felt good. You talked a little bit about how all you saw at the time, was your daughter's face. So how do you feel about PTSD in the field?
Oh, I think it's a thing that we've done a really poor job of addressing. And it's something that I think after a certain amount of time in the field, like, we've all got it in some form or fashion. I've been seeing a therapist for a few years now. I have a formal diagnosis of it. Like, one of the things my therapist and I talk about is it's not just the bad calls that result in this kind of stuff. We spend, an average shift is 12 hours long?
Ish, yeah.
Work 3 to 4 days a week. So 36 to 48 hours of your life a week is spent as a coiled spring ready to bounce out. And doing that fundamentally rewrites how your brain's neural pathways identifies a threat. Because when we respond to a call, it's an external stimulus that our brain doesn't know how to respond to. So it sends us into a fight or flight response. It messes with your amygdala, which is the thing that regulates how you emotionally respond to stuff. I've been out of the field now for 6.5 years. And like, every time I start listening to an episode of 911 Nonsense available where podcasts are sold.
Jesus. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, I got you. Anytime I start listening to an episode, the sound of the sirens and the radio chatter, like, I can feel myself tense up.
Yeah.
When I'm in my partner and I have talked about this, and she said, like, it's really interesting being in a public place with you because you will hear in a store 5 aisles over someone go, oh, and she's like, you like they're like a dog, like pointing right at it.
Yeah.
Because we hear these things that could be potential emergencies in our body, like it's not a conscious thing I'm doing,
Yeah.
and I don't think any of us do it consciously. Um, but our body focuses on these stimuli that we're trained, not necessarily through schooling, but through exposure and experience to respond to. And we talk about, we've all had that time when you've been at home and like you hear the tones in your dreams and you get up and you start like putting your pants on and you're like, wait a second,
Yeah. I'm not at work today.
yeah, this isn't my station.
Yeah.
But like that's a mild form of that rewiring of neural pathways. Like you forget where you are. Like you're so ingrained to respond.
So like we both worked down south. Have you ever, when you're driving up the hill on I-25, been like 5 minutes out, just out of
Oh
habit?
yeah.
Yeah, I've done that in the car, and my wife's like, 5 minutes from what, or 15 minutes or whatever. Like, I'm like, oh, that was habit. I don't know why I said that out loud. I'm sorry. I don't know.
And it's so funny how like how this job affects the way you think about things that you wouldn't even think are tied to it. I remember once my partner, she is from Colorado Springs. She has lived here most of her life, so she's very familiar with the area. I've only lived here for 4.5-ish years, so like I'm still learning stuff, but I still think about how I'm going to get to a place based on egress and access. Like there's a Costco up here, and like there's two exits you can get to get to it, and she always took one, like the most direct looking route, like, oh, there's the exit before the Costco and you turn here and then you have to go through all these lights. I'm like, but it cuts down your response time if you go to the next exit, which curves around and then brings you around the backside. Like there's less lights, there's less people to deal with.
Yeah.
And he's like, why do you think about it like that? And I'm like, I can't not think about it
Yeah,
like
you
that.
drove the ambulance forever and you had to know the easiest access points.
When I told her too, like when we go this way, it's all right hand turns, and like right hand turns are quicker because you can take a right hand turn without having to wait for the light.
Yep.
In an ambulance, that's the quickest way to go sometimes, is the way that seems the most back around.
Yeah.
Like, oh, actually, like I don't have to contend with traffic if I go this way.
Yeah.
It took me a while to explain to her, like, it just makes sense. I don't know how else to tell it to you. Like, this is just how it is.
Just this is what I say, just do it.
Yeah.
So, do you think that there are a lot of people who in the medical field fake PTSD or lie about it, like use it as a crutch almost?
I don't think so. And the reason is because we've gotten better, not just as an industry, but like as a whole, recognizing and being sympathetic to people that have something like PTSD. But there's still that stigma attached to it that I think if someone's faking it, like there's got to be some type of underlying reason. I don't necessarily think that anyone is would fake PTSD just for sympathy points.
I agree, and I just wanted your opinion because I think people are afraid that I think people are afraid we're going to say it too much. And I don't know if that's somebody who suffers from PTSD and they feel like they've earned that, like almost like a badge of honor, and they don't want it to be overutilized.
Sure. I mean, my response to somebody like that is, you don't get to dictate what gives or doesn't give someone PTSD. Like for the longest time, I think we in EMS were so hesitant to address PTSD because it felt like a thing that only soldiers had. And like if you didn't serve, like you couldn't have PTSD. Like what did you see?
Yeah, it was almost like
And
a
this
badge of
this
honor.
yeah, like this like downplaying of this serious thing. And while I don't claim to know the experiences of someone who has served in the military, can tell you from my service and seeing things that I would love to forget. Those images are indelible, and when I'm having a really bad night, they pop up in my dreams, and I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy.
Sure.
And I don't for one second think that that is a unique take or applicable to only me. I think with given enough time in this field, we all get there.
I will agree to a certain extent. This is such an unforgiving field. I think you can get there after 1 year, and it can only get worse after 10. But the stuff we're seeing these days, not to say that it's any worse than before, but
Oh, right. And so in my first year as a medic, when I worked for the long since past ambulance service, I responded to rollover accidents. I had a person was able to shoot themselves in the chest with a shotgun, suicides, traumatic injuries. Yeah, like you have to want it at that point.
yeah,
Just stuff like that. And it made me because I didn't recognize what was going on, at the time, but it made me short tempered and cynical. And I know that we wear it as a badge of honor that when people are having their worst days, like we are there for them. And that's a noble and admirable goal. But what it doesn't address is we're there for everybody's worst day. And I'm really glad to see that awareness has risen and there are more resources out there. And I hope that trend continues.
I agree 100%. Do you feel comfortable talking about maybe one of your worst ones that has affected you personally?
Yeah,
If you feel comfortable sharing it.
no, I do. So the worst thing that I remember isn't necessarily like the goriest call or the most graphic scene. I remember when I was working for an ambulance service, I and my partner and I got dispatched to a 9 echo, a cardiac arrest, and it was out in the war zone in one of the kind of long term like residency motels that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we get out there, and fire's already on scene. They've already started working it, and we get in, and it's this older gentleman, but he's not. I wouldn't call him elderly. Like, I honestly don't remember this particular detail very clearly. I would say like mid 50s or something. He didn't look
Okay.
like he was in particularly good health. Um, but we did all the stuff that we normally do, and unfortunately, like most codes, we never ended up getting Ross. And I had been kind of talking with the family already, and so I told the fire guys like, "Hey, I'll go let them know what's going on." And we would go into there. They had two rooms, and they were one of those rooms that was like joined with a door,
Mm-hmm.
and like the second room had been converted into like it had a kitchenette and another couple of beds and stuff. And it's interesting, like the things you don't notice when you're going onto a scene, like you kind of tunnel vision. Like for a code, you're like, all right, where's my patient? Let's get going. And then as you start to like kind of widen your field of view, then you start to pick up on little details. I go and talk to his wife, and it turns out his two children and his kids were, I think the oldest one looked like he was about 6 or 7 years old, right? Just at that age where you're being taught in school, like if you have a problem, you call 911 and these guys will show up and they will fix that problem.
Yeah.
And the wife is sitting there and she's holding kids, and I remember crouching down next to her, and I said, I'm sorry, we've done everything we can, and at this point, like, there's nothing more we can do. And she starts crying, and there was a little boy, and then the second kid was a little girl. She was younger, and that little girl kind of been older than 3 or 4. Like she didn't really understand what was going on. She knew dad was sick, and then a bunch of people came in, and now mom's upset, and so she was upset. I get the feeling she was upset because mom was upset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I watched in that little boy's eyes his whole worldview break. Because he was being told in school, "Hey, if there's a fire, you call the fire department. They come and they'll save everybody. If there's a problem, you call the cops, and they're there for you. If you get hurt, you call the ambulance, and the ambulance shows up, and they make everything better." And like at 6 or 7 years old, like you're old enough to understand the concept of death and the permanency. And I will always remember until the day I die, how he looked, because he didn't cry. That kid had 1,000 mile stare. Like he was anywhere else but there. And like that, that breaks my heart because like every person will realize at some point that the world can be a really shitty place. And that's probably the hardest one because it's not, it feels like a thing that you can't really, like we can all commiserate about the bloody graphic calls and, there's that silver lining of getting to work trauma skills. Like maybe you can do something, but like there's no training I have, there's no skill I possess. Like that kid on that day had to learn a really, really hard truth.
Yeah, that one's rough. I
Yeah.
often hear, that the family's response to these terrible calls is what's affecting people more than the actual call.
Yeah.
And it is true, and there's no way for us to, like, in the hospital you can kind of quickly guide the family out and put them into a little room. But when you're in the field, you can't do that. Maybe you can move them to the living room or you can put them outside. But there's like so many codes that I worked where it's kind of a hard line whether or not you let the family member stay in the room.
Yeah.
And it's hard because if they don't see what you're doing, they're probably not going to believe that you tried to do everything that you could.
Yeah. But it's also, it's such a violent process. Like,
It is a violent process. CPR is not an easy thing to do, you
no.
know. And we don't crack ribs on everybody, but when you do crack ribs, like I remember the first time I cracked ribs, and that was a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
Terrible feeling, because then you think, well, if they do survive this, now they've got this that they have to get through, and that's not going to feel very good.
Right.
Ugh, that one was rough, dude.
Yeah. And sometimes I wish, the hard thing was like this really graphic call, and I saw this and that, but it's so much harder to contextualize, like watching a child's heartbreak.
Yeah. I think Hallmark has it down pretty good, with their Christmas movies. But it's a completely different story when it's real life.
Did I just need to download that shit to my iPhone and be like, here, I need you to watch this on scene? Like,
I know, like,
while I go do this, you watch this heartwarming movie.
yeah, you're screaming at me right now because I'm putting you in triage after you called me for something like toe pain. Would you like to see what I just dealt with?
Right.
Let me play this in reverse for you.
Well, I remember that time I was working nights, and there was at like 10 or 11 at night. And so, I remember that shift and subsequent shifts after just feeling off, and I never really dealt with it. I just put it in a box and put it, in my mental closet, and was like, I'll deal with this at some point, I'm sure.
Sure. And I feel like that makes you kind of question what you're doing, right? Like, not you specifically, but EMTs. I mean, there's been a few times where you're just walking out like, why am I doing this?
Oh yeah.
Why am I doing this to myself?
So I never wanted to be a paramedic. That was never my goal. Um, I got my EMT license because I wanted not a weird job. I needed a job that worked weird hours so I could go to culinary school.
Oh, you want to be a chef.
That was the plan.
Interesting.
And I took my EMT basic class fall of 2006. And I was one of those kids in high school that like I didn't have to try really hard, and I was able to get B's, and like I just kind of slacked off. And like every gifted kid out there has stories about how like they were told they had nothing but potential, and then none of us ever lived up to it. And that was back at the time. The college I went to required you to get an 80% on everything, like not just the class average, but like every test required an 80%. And I took my first test and I got a 79, and the teacher pulled me aside and she was like, what the fuck are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, you're way smarter than this. Like, if you want to take this seriously, like she's like, I have the ability to like with my discretion, keep you going. And like, then you gotta knock everything else out of the park, which is like, if you want to fuck around, like I'll kick you out of the class right now. But if you like want to take this seriously and learn what you're doing, like I'll keep you around. And it was the kick in the ass that I needed. And like I
Yeah.
applied myself and I graduated, or I finished the class and got my license. When I had it in hand, I was like, I really like this. And I don't like I can cook at home. I can't really do EMS at home.
Yeah.
And I kept with it. And here I am, like so many years later. And there were days when I was like, I would rather go peel potatoes and yell, "Yes, chef," than like deal with some of the shit we have to see.
Right. Sometimes those potatoes are a lot lighter than the mental weight you're carrying, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a true story. This job can be really tough, but it can be really rewarding too, you know?
I think ultimately it's been more good than bad. But man, that bad, it's not as lopsided a scale as I would hope.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
know, and like having to explain to my kids like what PTSD is, and like how mine manifests, and how like the other day my I was with my daughter in the grocery store, and I hate grocery stores. It is an environment that I cannot control, and so I just want to get in and get out. And like she's an 8-year-old little girl that just like skipping around and like
Having
dancing
a
and
good
doing all,
time, yeah.
yeah. And finally I had to tell her like I need you to stop. And she was, because I went from like zero to like knock it off.
Yeah,
And I had to explain to her like once we got out of the store, I had to be like, okay, kiddo, like let me tell you how dad's brain works. And said like, one of the things that stresses me out is grocery stores, and they stress me out because of some of the things I've dealt with on the job. And I don't like being around this many people at a given time. And so like when I'm in the grocery store, like my goal is to get in, get what I need, and get out.
sure.
And said like, and every time like you're dancing around and stuff, and I see movement out of the corner of my eye, like I keep turning towards it, and like all that's doing is raising my stress because there's all this stuff coming at me. And like logically, I know that it's just you, but like there's a part of my brain that doesn't respond logically. It's there to protect me, and right now it's doing its damnedest to like get me ready to protect myself. And like I don't think it's necessarily super common to have to explain hypervigilance to a second grader.
No. I don't think it's very common to explain hypervigilance to anybody. Like,
Yeah.
when any time that my wife and I go out, she's constantly telling me, stop staring, stop staring, stop staring. You know, and I'm like, not necessarily staring at one person, but I'm constantly checking to make sure nobody's pulling weapons or that
Oh yeah.
nobody's fighting. And like, because the other day there was a shooting at a movie theater. And like, just the day before, we had gone to watch a movie, you know? And it wasn't like, it was literally over seats.
Oh yeah.
They fought over seats.
The Club Q shooting that happened here last year.
Yeah.
Um, right next to it is a mini golf place that we love going to because it's like $4 a round and they sell pretty cheap beer. But like especially as the weather gets warmer, like we go mini golfing because it's a cheap thing to do and we can have a drink and like we all have a good time. And then right across the parking lot is Club Q. And at that point, my partner and I were living half a mile from it. Like we heard the sirens going by. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, oh, like something's going on.
Yeah.
And I just put it to rest. And you find out the next day, like, oh God, like there was a huge MCI and it was right there. And like we go to that place that's next door to this place. And it's like that happens and you can feel your brain being like, see, I told you so, man. Like head on a swivel all the time.
Yeah. So if you could go back and give yourself advice when you're coming into the field, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to find a therapist right away and to not let yourself be afraid to process what you see, and that this job will give you a lot, but it will take so much more from you if you let it. And for the longest time, I let it. And it's only after leaving EMS in the field that I've been able to reclaw some of that back.
That's good advice, dude. Strong, strong sound advice.
Ultimately, I think I would probably tell myself, like, really think about it. Because I I wanted to get into the fire department and do all that stuff. And not everyone's cut out for the fire service. I'm not. And like, know what you want to do. Because, working EMS for 30 years it's not a viable career path for a lot of people anymore.
No, it's hard. It's a hard job. It's a hard career. And I don't think there's enough protections set up for the people that are wanting, to be in it for the longevity.
Yeah. Was the average lifespan of a paramedic now is like 2.5 years.
I keep hearing that, and it's yeah, everybody has said about 2 to 3 years.
And like the things that makes me wonder is not, so I'm having to retake statistics because I'm trying to get in nurse practitioner school. And a C isn't good enough. C's get degrees, they do not get you admission.
I love statistics.
Well, you need to take this fucking class from me then. But you and I are statistical outliers. Like we throw off this average. And it doesn't make me wonder how we got here. Like you and I, and those of us that have been around for a long time have found that satisfaction and that ability to continue on with our jobs. It makes me wonder about all the people that skew that average below that.
Hmm.
And if they had enough support, if they could have made it, for every paramedic that does it for 15 or 20 years, there's got to be uncounted masses of those that couldn't get through a licensure research cycle. And like, is that because that it wasn't for them? Because if that's the case, like, I get it. Square pegs, round holes, sometimes it doesn't work. But I have to imagine that some of those kids, if they had gotten the support that they needed when they had that first real hard call, if they could have continued on.
Sure, they could have gone on to be good providers.
Because I think ultimately it does a disservice to our field. Like we shouldn't hear like, oh, the average lifespan of a paramedic is 2 to 3 years. And like, look, we're still here. We're super tough. It's how is it so short? And what can we do to support each other to bring that average up?
Yeah, and would you say that that's comparable to like an ER nurse?
I don't know about ER nursing specifically, but I know nurses have a lot of opportunities that paramedics don't have. Like I have my BSN, I could take that anywhere. I've worked in the corrections system for a time, like just popping out meds and handing them out like candy. And like, it's something you could do if you can recognize colors and shapes and you can read. Like, you don't need a nursing degree for it. You
Yeah.
need like sixth grade reading literacy and to not be colorblind.
Yeah.
But like, they want nurses there and they pay for it. And, if one day I'm like, I'm sick of the floor, I'm going to go work somewhere else, I can go work somewhere else.
Yeah, you literally could go anywhere.
Yeah. But as a paramedic, you know, it's, do you want to be in management slash will they hire you for management, or do you want to go teach or do you want to go fly? And if you don't want to do those three things, like, well, then I don't know what to tell you, man. Like rig life or bust, baby.
Yep, it's true. So if you could do it all over, would you become a paramedic again?
If I had my memories and experiences and whatnot going back,
Mm-hmm.
no,
No. Would you go straight into nursing?
but not as a negative. Like if I'm going back and I have all my memories and my experiences and stuff, like I don't need to relive that stuff. I still have it. I'll go do something else. If I had the rare opportunity and the gift to go back and retain the person I am now with the experiences and things that molded me, but like my indestructible 21-year-old self, fuck no. I'm gonna I'm gonna go. I'll go cook.
Yeah, you'd go and cook.
I mean, at that point, like, yeah, I've spent my time as a medic. Let's go do something else.
Awesome. All right, bud. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
The conversation was great. I kind of want to give you the opportunity if you have like a charity or, like Rob has Skulls for Hope or there's Hero to Hero. Do you have any programs that you would suggest?
Schools for Hope is a fantastic, fantastic foundation. I think Rob's doing some of the best work out there. I know in Albuquerque, he really raised awareness and the ability to talk about it. And like, I love Rob. I think
Yeah,
Rob's
he's a
one of the
great
best.
dude.
I think Rob's one of the best people out there. And like him doing that was huge. So I'll shout out Skulls for Hope, and then I'll shout out the Code Green campaign.
Code Green, okay.
Yeah. And then I just say, like, if you're working in the medical field and you're not already seeing a therapist or talking to somebody, it's the best thing you can do for yourself. It's the soundest investment you can make, is to go talk with someone, even if it's just once a month and you're just getting stuff off your chest.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kegan. I appreciate you coming out and spending the time with us today. It's, again, great conversation, man. The great stories. I hope that you're walking away feeling good about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Yeah, no, man, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you for listening. Before we wrap up, we have a few important announcements to share with you. Firstly, we're excited to announce the launch of our brand new 911 Nonsense Facebook group page. It's a community where everyone can go to connect, share ideas, discuss topics from the show, and get all of the most recent updates about the podcast. We'd love to have you join us and be part of the conversation. Next, we want to ask you to rate and review our podcast on your preferred platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach a wider audience. By rating and reviewing the show, you'll be supporting us in a big way and helping others discover 911 Nonsense. If you enjoy what we do and would like to support the podcast even further, we have a few options available. You can visit samspursuit.com to find the links to our 911 Nonsense merch page and our recently released Noon gear page. Every contribution, no matter the size, goes a long way in helping us continue to better the podcast. We know that not everyone is comfortable being on the podcast, but we still want to hear your stories and experiences. If you have a compelling story and would like to share it to be read by me in a future episode, please reach out to us via email at 911nonsense@gmail.com or through our website's contact section. If you choose to be anonymous, we'll make sure to respect your privacy while sharing your story in a way that resonates with our audience. Thank you again for tuning in. We truly appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more engaging content in the future. See you next week.